In Ethiopia's local government area of Delta State, there lies a quiet community known as Kokori, a place that recently witnessed one of the most heartbreaking and tragic events in its history. The story revolved around two men once bound by brotherhood but later divided by loyalty and greed: Efeturi, a well-known member of the Jurist Confraternity, and Opa Six, a former member of the same group who later joined the Supreme Vikings Confraternity. At the heart of this story are two rival brotherhoods, the Jurist Confraternity and the Supreme Vikings Confraternity. The Jurist Confraternity, also known as the National Association of Grand Lords, was founded in 1992 at the Federal Polytechnic, Ochi, in Edo State. Over the years, it grew into a widespread brotherhood known for its strong network and deep loyalty among members. The Supreme Vikings Confraternity, on the other hand, was another powerful and feared organization that had built its own presence across campuses and communities. The tragic chain of events that shook Kokori began with a figure known on the streets as Opa Six. He was a young man with a reputation that carried both admiration and fear. Though once a proud jurist, he later switched allegiance to the Supreme Vikings, a move that would eventually draw dangerous attention to him. Beyond his involvement in confraternity matters, Opa Six was also allegedly involved in a form of online business that many young men across Nigeria had ventured into. He was said to act as a middleman, someone who provided assistance to people who needed a functional bank account to receive payments from abroad. In local slang, this type of business is commonly referred to as Yohu Yohu, and those who engage in it are often called Yohu Boys or G Guys. Opa Six's role was simple on the surface. When a local boy expecting foreign payment needed an account to receive the funds, he would turn to Opa Six. After the money arrived, Opa Six was expected to take his agreed percentage and then transfer the rest to the person who contacted him. It was a business built purely on trust, and that was where Opa Six failed repeatedly. He was known for being greedy and unreliable. Many people who dealt with him claimed he had a habit of taking the entire amount for himself and later coming up with stories. He would often claim the money never reached his account, or that there had been a problem with the transaction. Some who knew him said that he loved to live large and flaunt a lifestyle far beyond his actual means, often at the expense of others. Whenever anyone questioned him or demanded accountability, Opa Six's charm would quickly turn into aggression. If persuasion didn't work, he was known to use intimidation and threats to silence whoever confronted him. With time, he became notorious in Kokori and beyond for being a man who could not be trusted, yet one who was not easily challenged because of his strong ties and bold personality. But beneath that confidence and influence, Opa Six had been building silent enemies, both in the streets and within his former brotherhood. And it was only a matter of time before the consequences of his actions would catch up with him, leading to a tragedy that would shake Kokori and leave everyone asking how things went so wrong. Opa Six had always believed that his membership in the Jurist Confraternity gave him the power and protection to do as he pleased. To him, belonging to such a feared and respected brotherhood meant he could handle any situation and walk away untouched. Whenever a dispute arose between him and anyone he had business dealings with, Opa Six would confidently rely on the influence of his confraternity to silence the issue. It became a pattern, one that many people around Kokori soon came to recognize. When clients complained about him not sending their rightful share of the money after a successful deal, he would quickly boast about his connection to the jurist. Some of these clients, out of fear, would quietly let the matter go. Others who tried to confront him or demand fairness soon discovered how dangerous he could be when backed by his brothers. He would make calls, and in no time, some of his confraternity associates would reach out to the complainant, either directly or indirectly, warning them to drop the matter. For Opa Six, this system worked perfectly. It made him feel untouchable, like someone who could deceive, cheat, or intimidate his way through life without facing any consequence. But over time, his behavior began to create serious tension within the Jurist Confraternity itself. Some senior members started getting fed up with his constant issues. They were tired of being dragged into unnecessary conflicts simply because of one man's greed. Every few weeks, another problem involving Opa Six would arise, and the group would once again be forced to intervene, trying to prevent the matter from blowing up into something bigger. Several times, he was summoned by some respected members of the Brotherhood and advised to change his ways. They told him plainly that his actions were bringing unnecessary attention and trouble to their name. They warned that a day would come when the jurist would no longer stand behind him if he continued to behave recklessly. But Opa Six, known for his stubbornness and pride, ignored their warnings. He believed that as long as he carried the jurist title, nobody would dare to harm him. He continued his deceptive activities, finding new people to take advantage of and new stories to cover up his dishonesty. He became even bolder, showing no sign of slowing down. But unknown to him, he was walking on thin ice. His reputation had already begun to spread beyond Kokori. Many people who had fallen victim to his tricks were quietly waiting for the right opportunity to confront him. The beginning of his downfall came when he decided to play his usual game with the wrong person, a young man who was said to be a member of a rival brotherhood known as the Vikings Confraternity. This was a group known for its boldness and readiness to defend its members under any circumstance. Opa Six, unaware of the kind of man he was dealing with, tried to use the same deceptive tactic he had used on others, keeping money that wasn't his and creating stories to cover up his actions. But this time, the person he cheated was not someone to be easily intimidated. Unlike the others who had feared his jurist influence, this new opponent had his own network, his own backing, and his own pride to protect. That single act, trying to cheat a fight, would set in motion a series of events that no one in Kokori could have imagined. It was the beginning of a chain reaction that would end in blood, regret, and tragedy, shaking not just Opa Six's world but the entire balance between the brotherhoods in Delta State. The trouble began when Opa Six decided to play his usual trick on the wrong person, a member of Ethiope Confraternity. The deal between them started like any other. The Mofite member had trusted Opa Six to handle a certain online transaction for him, expecting that after the money came in, Opa Six would take his agreed commission and return the balance. But as usual, when the payment cleared, Opa Six decided to keep everything for himself. To him, it was just another smooth operation, one of those quick, easy scores that had worked so many times before. But this time, things didn't go as planned. The Mofite member soon found out what had happened and confronted Opa Six, demanding his money. What started as a heated argument quickly grew into a serious matter. Both men stood firm, one demanding his due, the other trying to talk his way out of trouble. Opa Six soon realized that the man he was arguing with was not just an ordinary street boy. He was a proud Mofite member, and members of that confraternity were known for being bold and fearless when it came to defending their name. The confrontation between them became intense. Opa Six could sense danger. He knew that this was not a situation he could talk his way out of. Having dealt with confraternity matters for years, he understood how things could escalate. Rival groups like the Mofites and the Jurists rarely saw eye to eye. Disputes between them could easily turn violent if not handled carefully. So, Opa Six decided that his best move was to seek protection from his brothers in the Jurist Confraternity, the same people who had always backed him whenever he found himself in trouble. But this time, things didn't go the way he expected. When word reached his jurist brothers about what had happened, they didn't rush to support him. Instead, they called him in for a meeting. There, they reminded him of all the warnings they had given in the past, the warnings to change his ways, to stop using their name to cover up his bad dealings. They told him plainly that they would not get involved in another problem caused by his dishonesty. They advised him to do the right thing and pay back the Mofite member. It was the only way, they said, to prevent a much bigger problem. But Opa Six was in a tight corner. The money he was being asked to return was already gone. He had spent it recklessly, believing nothing serious would come of it. Now, with no money to refund and no support from the jurists, he began to panic. To Opa Six, their refusal to back him up felt like betrayal. These were the same men he had defended in the past, the same brotherhood he had been loyal to for years. He felt abandoned and exposed. The Mofite member was still pressing hard, threatening to take matters into his own hands. Opa Six could sense that things could get very bad for him if he didn't find new protection quickly. In a desperate attempt to secure safety and power, Opa Six made a drastic decision, one that shocked everyone who knew him. He renounced his membership in the Jurist Confraternity and pledged allegiance to one of their strongest rivals, the Supreme Vikings Confraternity. It was a bold and dangerous move, one that only a desperate man could make. For Opa Six, this was more than just a change of loyalty, it was a survival strategy. He believed that by joining the Supreme Vikings, he could gain the protection he needed against any attack from the Mofites. He wanted to send a message that he was not alone and that anyone who came for him would have to face the wrath of a powerful brotherhood. But in reality, that decision marked the beginning of his downfall. Switching sides so suddenly made him an enemy to his former jurist brothers, and it didn't earn him the full trust of his new allies either. People whispered that he joined the Supreme Vikings out of fear, not loyalty, and in the world of confraternities, such actions could easily make a man's life very dangerous. What Opa Six didn't know was that this single decision, born out of desperation, would soon spark a chain of events that would shake Kokori to its very roots. It would lead to betrayals, confrontations, and ultimately, a tragedy that no one saw coming. Opa Six's decision to abandon the Jurist Confraternity and swear loyalty to the Supreme Vikings Confraternity shook the entire community of Kokori. Within the Jurists, his sudden switch of allegiance was seen as a grave act of betrayal. To them, Opa Six wasn't just another member who walked away, he was someone they had once protected, defended, and even risked their reputation for. His choice to join a rival brotherhood after all the help and loyalty they had shown him felt like a knife in the back. Many of the Jurist members saw his action as proof of deep ingratitude. They believed that by turning his back on them, Opa Six had disrespected the very brotherhood that had once saved him from countless troubles. Among the Jurists, betrayal was one of the worst offenses a member could commit. And in the world of confraternities, such a move rarely went without consequence. Tensions began to rise quickly. Whispers spread through both groups, the Jurists were angry, and the Vikings were now being blamed for taking in a man who still had unsettled issues with another brotherhood. Not long after, the Jurist Confraternity reached out to the Supreme Vikings to demand an explanation. They wanted to know why the Vikings had accepted Opa Six into their ranks when it was well known that he had belonged to the Jurists. The Vikings, however, claimed they had no prior knowledge of Opa Six's past ties. According to them, he never revealed his former allegiance when he joined their organization. To prevent things from escalating further, both confraternities agreed to meet in person to settle the matter peacefully. A meeting was arranged at a neutral location in Kokori. Members from both sides gathered. The Jurists came with a small delegation, while the Vikings arrived with their local leader, accompanied by several of their men. Opa Six also came, now standing proudly among his new brothers, dressed in their colors and symbols. At first, the discussion started calmly, with both sides trying to explain their perspectives. But as the talks went on, tempers began to rise. Words turned sharp, accusations flew across the table, and before long, the atmosphere became tense. The Jurists felt disrespected. They believed the Vikings were deliberately shielding a man they considered a traitor. The Vikings, on the other hand, saw the Jurists as overreacting and trying to intimidate them. Then, suddenly, the argument turned chaotic. What began as a peace meeting erupted into a violent confrontation. The Jurists had come in larger numbers and appeared more prepared for any possible clash. When the fight broke out, the Vikings, realizing they were outnumbered, fled from the scene to save themselves. In their haste, they even left behind one of their motorcycles as they ran. The incident caused shockwaves through Kokori. People in the community began whispering about how bad things had gotten between the two groups. Many feared that the tension was far from over. And unfortunately, they were right. A few days later, one of the respected jurist members, a man known as Efeturi, decided that the issue needed to be resolved once and for all. He reached out to the Vikings for another peace meeting, hoping to calm things down before it turned into something worse. Efeturi was known as someone who believed in dialogue over violence, and he thought that if both sides could talk openly, the matter could finally be put to rest. He attended the meeting with just 4 other jurist members, believing that this second gathering would be peaceful. But unknown to them, the Vikings who came for this second meeting were not in the same mood for peace. Having been humiliated at the first meeting, where they had been outnumbered and forced to flee, they arrived this time heavily prepared and in large numbers, over 20 of them. As soon as both sides met, things went terribly wrong. The Vikings, seeking revenge for their earlier embarrassment, attacked immediately. The confrontation was sudden and fierce. The 4 jurists who came with Efeturi tried to escape, and though they managed to flee with injuries, Efeturi was not so lucky. He was surrounded and fatally attacked before he could get away. News of the tragedy spread across Kokori like wildfire. What began as a misunderstanding between two individuals had now escalated into something much darker, a loss that would haunt both groups forever. The people of Kokori mourned deeply. They had seen how a simple disagreement, fueled by greed, betrayal, and pride, could lead to irreversible loss. It became a painful reminder of how confraternity conflicts destroy lives, families, and entire communities. Let this story serve as a strong message: violence, never the answer. No matter the disagreement, no matter the pride, nothing good ever comes from confrontation and revenge. The young people of our nation must learn from what happened in Kokori, to say no to cultism, no to violence, and yes to peace, progress, and unity.